sure I get the right answer.
Well, I guess we can talk about the solution. This is our Tuesday, Thursday class. All right. Well, hopefully my compact flashcard won't fail, during the class today. I just, fixed it, before this class, so we'll see. Okay. This stuff is not really relevant to this class, so I won't talk about it. We have a new homework assignment, so that, I kind of said that you guys would get a new homework assignment for some time already, but I forgot to actually do it. And I did grade the previous, homework assignment, so that one was already graded. And this is your new homework assignment. It's called by val by ref. It's an exercise of subroutine calling with passing by value and passing by reference parameters. Let's go ahead and take a look at the program. And this time I made both it available in ODS if you want to use OpenOffice, or if you want to use Microsoft Office, you can use the XLSX version. So it is now available in both formats, and you can choose whichever one you want to use. I'm going to take a look. We're going to take a look at the code first, just so that we know what is involved. And you should probably get started with it as soon as possible. It's not going to be a long trace, However, it does test your understanding of the concepts. So you got to make sure that you get a head start to make sure that you're okay with the concepts involved in this project or in this homework assignment. The program is not long. It has two subroutines. It looks kind of long, but it really is not. We start execution on line 14. Line 14, just initializes a global variable w to a value of 10. Okay, pretty easy to do. And then on line 15, we invoke a subroutine called relay. Relay is defined here from line 6 to line 12. Relay is basically relaying, the parameters to the actual subroutine that is doing the work to double. The first thing it does is to pass parameter m to double, and parameter m is passed by value. So now you have to exercise, how do you pass a parameter that was passed by value to me, and I want to pass it by reference to another subroutine. Okay. And then the second one, well, n gets m, n plus m is easy to do. The next one is passing parameter n, which was passed to me by reference as parameter x of double. Yep.
What x? Well, how do you know what x? I mean, I assume it's a reference variable because it has the both pointing both.
Yes, there are two clues that x is passed by reference. When you look at the definition of double, it says right here that x is a parameter that is passed by reference.
Oh, okay.
So line 2 directly tells you that it is a passed by reference parameter. But when you look at the notation on line 9 as well as on line 11, the use of the double-sided arrow also tells you that parameter x is passed by reference. Okay? So the question is, what is going to happen to w at the end of the execution of this program? Okay? So are there any questions about this homework assignment? The trace itself is not long. I mean, the trace of this one is going to be fairly short. The question is, do you know how to set up the parameters correctly in this case? Are there any questions about this one? No? Okay.
What day is it?
It's due in 1 week. So we have, 1 week minus 5 minutes now. Okay.
ODS is open office, right?
ODS is open office, XLSX is Excel.
Like last time you said it had to be open office so that you could do calculations.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still a true statement?
It would be nice if you can, just preserve, the log information. Okay. So that's your new homework assignment. And let's take a look at, this class was actually way ahead of the other class, so we'll go take a look at what we talked about last time. Okay, last time we talked about how to transfer money from my account to my wife's account. Okay, and I suggested to you guys and say, well, what if I specified wife's account twice here and we did not trace this code, did we? Okay, so let's go ahead and trace this code and find out what happens when I use the same thing twice to specify that. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this file first, this time to today's folder. Okay, so let me just quickly go over this program again. We are now starting to kind of use a standard in C and C++. In other words, everything that you write has to start with the subroutine main. Everything that you want to do is inside the subroutine that is called main. And outside of this subroutine, there's only one single invoke statement to invoke the main subroutine. This is not my standard. This is a standard that is used in C and C++ programs. And I just want to make this class, more consistent with the C and C++ class, so that when you guys move on to cisp300, you already know what the main function is. This program has no global variables whatsoever. Everything is a local variable or parameter. Because main does not have any parameters. All it does is to invoke the subroutine main. The line 18 only invokes subroutine main, and everything starts here. I have two local variables, one to represent my account, one to represent my wife's account. I start with $100. My wife's account starts with, let's see, $2 million. Okay. And the first thing I do is I am going to transfer every single penny of my account to my wife's account, because in a transfer, we transfer from X to Y. X is decremented by n. Y is incremented by n. Are we doing okay so far with this code? Because I think we traced this code once, but with only the first line of the transfer. Okay. The question is, what are we going to do with the second transfer, the second invocation of transfer? The second invocation of transfer is using my wife's account twice. In other words, it's using my wife's account as parameter X as well as parameter Y. Okay? So inside the subroutine transfer, now we have a problem. Well, not exactly a problem, but it is called aliasing. In other words, we have two passed by reference parameters referring to exactly the same thing. The question is, will it cause problems in this case? And we're only transferring 200 here, so I don't even bother to make this also wife's account just a particular number. So we'll go ahead and trace that particular line and find out what's going to happen. I'm going to delete this row here because it really is not needed. So we'll go ahead and delete that row, and we'll just say that it's $200, which is more realistic. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this trace. What do you think will happen before we actually trace it? Can you anticipate what will happen when we run this code?
Wife's account's going to have two different values.
But it's only one single column. That's the problem. So it can only store one value at any particular time.
The last value
Hmm? Well, let's see. Let's see what will happen. Okay, this is kind of interesting. Okay, we don't have any conditions here. We can start with line number as a column, and we have no global variables, so the precondition really has nothing to say. And then we start with line 18. Line 18 also is really easy to do because all it does is to invoke main. The return line number is just post. And then we start execution inside the main subroutine. The main subroutine starts with line 12. And, oh, I forgot one thing, didn't I? Because I did not allocate the columns when we invoke main. Now, this is also important. Local variables and all parameters must be allocated when you invoke a subroutine. In this case, we have two local variables. One is tax account, and one is my wife's account. So I'm just going to write it so it doesn't take up too much space. Yep.
Why are you doing it at line 18 when it don't start until line 9?
Because the invocation, the invocation of the subroutine is when you allocate the columns for the local variables. Of the subroutine, yep. The actual time of doing it is somewhere in between, okay? In other words, the allocation of tax account and wife's account, of the columns, actually, if you look at the assembly code of a program, it happens sometime between the execution of line 18 and the execution of line 12. But this is close enough. This is close enough to what is actually happening. Now, the other thing you have to remember is when we use local variables, they all start with unknown values. Okay, remember that really well, because if you start to use these values, they are unpredictable. They have some kind of value. You can access it. C does not complain. It's just that you don't know what value you'll be accessing. Yep.
What if the function? I mean the line 18 was the manual just calling a function and pass the value, so then you would know the beginning value. You
could do that, yep. But there's no way the invocation of main knows how much to start with.
Can you pass values to local?
If you're passing anything, that becomes a by-val parameter.
Right. So
yep. You could pass it. Yep. Except in the standard of a C program, you cannot pass that to the main subroutine. There are two parameters that you can pass to the main subroutine, and that has to do with when you invoke the program itself on the command line, what are you using as parameters? So that's kind of well beyond the scope of what we talk about in this class. So for what we are doing in this class, we always say that when we invoke main, you don't pass any parameters. It cannot accept parameters. Okay. Okay, on line 12, we initialize my account to 100, which is actually pointless because we are not even going to use my account for anything in this code. Oops. On line 13, we initialize my wife's account to $200. And then on line 15, I don't even bother to renumber the lines. It's not necessary, okay? As long as we don't have duplicate line numbers, everything is fine. On line 15, we invoke the subroutine transfer. Okay, so we need a return line number here. We also need to specify the columns for the parameters. We have one for x, one for y, and one for n. Okay, because if you look into the definition of transfer, we have x, y being passed by reference and n being passed by value. The return line number is the easy one because the invocation happens on line 15. That means when we are done, we have to go back to line 16. Okay, so return line number is line 16 here. X is passed by reference. Okay, X is passed by reference, and I use my wife's account to specify parameter X. So what should I write here when X is passed by reference?
AKA column D.
AKA column D. Now that is exactly what it should be. Okay, it is an alias of column D. Oops, I said D and I typed C. Okay. Is that okay so far? This is basically what we have already understood before the exam. Passing by reference means we want the parameter, in this case parameter X, to be an alias of reference to something else. Now, whatever I use here to specify the left-hand side, my wife's account, which is living